In 1948, a body is found on a quiet Australian beach that would set off an international mystery.
The man is sharply dressed, he has no ID, and all that's found on him is some loose change and a second-class rail ticket.
All of the man's clothing labels are removed, and absolutely any trace of his identity is wiped. What investigators do find is a note that reads with the words Tamám Shud, which is Farsi or Persian for the end. Nearby the crime scene, a book is found that contains the same phrase. Within the book, there is a series of codes that have still not been cracked to this day. This is one of the longest unsolved mysteries in Australia. We're about to plunge into a whirlpool of secrets, codes, and unanswered questions. This case takes place during a time when the world was still recovering from the aftermath of World War II. So on the morning of December 1st, 1948, a jockey, John Lyons, is out for a ride on the beach. The beach known as Somerton Beach is a popular stretch near the Adelaide coast in South Australia. The sun had just barely risen, casting a golden glow over the sand and surf. As they rode, something caught Lyons' eyes. A man propped up against the seawall, his legs extended. In front of him, his arms and feet crossed. At first glance, it seemed as though the man was simply enjoying a peaceful morning by the sea. Upon closer inspection, it became apparent that something was amiss. The man was unusually still and his face had that waxy, dead look. Concerned, Lyons decided to alert the authorities. The police arrived at the scene at 6:30 a.m., led by Sergeant Lyle Leanne.
This man was dressed in a white shirt, a red and blue tie.
But what struck the investigator was the absence of any identification. No wallet, no driver's license, and no passport. Even more peculiar is the fact that all the labels have been meticulously removed from his clothing, as if someone had gone to great lengths to make sure he couldn't be identified. Just for people that aren't aware, this is something that's done in the spy world.
The pigs and clothes would be backed in with stuff you suit through a tailor so that it leave the tag and helps bits of the identity to put the harm to Trent.
But the condition of the body does add a layer of mystery. There's no signs of trauma, no bruises, no cuts, and there's absolutely no indication of a struggle. His hands and fingernails are clean, almost as if he'd prepared himself for some sort of meeting. The man's pockets contained a curious assortment of items. An unused bus ticket from Adelaide to Glenelg, an unused second-class rail ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, a narrow aluminum American comb, a half-empty packet of juicy fruit chewing gum, an Army Club cigarette pack containing Kensitas cigarettes, and some loose change. None of these items offered any clues to his identity. The authorities were completely perplexed. Initial examinations suggested that the man wasn't in the water, and he had died in the resting position where he was found. The body was soon taken to the Royal Adelaide Hospital, where pathologist John Burton Cleland would attempt to unravel the mystery. The autopsy would only deepen the enigma surrounding the man from Somerton Beach. And if you think it's already mysterious, just wait until you find out what the investigators found in his pants. Sergeant Lionel Leanne and his team were faced with a conundrum that seemed to defy all conventional wisdom. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? And how did he die? The first step was to examine the man's personal effects, so they went through all his stuff. The bus ticket is particularly intriguing because part of it was used the previous day, November 30th, 1948. So it means that the man traveled from Adelaide to Glenelg, but for what purpose? So he's not from the area, we know that. Why did he have an unused train ticket? Was he planning to go somewhere else? The different brands of cigarettes in the same packet also puzzled investigators. Why would someone switch cigarette brands but keep them in the same package? So the investigators have their hands completely tied in this. They don't have any clues, any leads. They're just lost. And just when things were seeming hopeless, one of the investigators does discover a hidden pocket sewn into the man's waistband. Inside the secret pocket is a scrap of paper torn from a book with a cryptic message that stumped the investigators. It completely reinvigorates the case, and this cryptic message could be the key to solving this guy's identity. So what exactly is on this piece of paper that we mentioned? It's the words Tamám Shud. It's a Persian phrase or Farsi, and immediately the investigators don't quite understand what it means. It would become the start of an even greater mystery. Linguistic experts were immediately consulted, and they soon identified it as a Persian phrase that means ended or finished. This led investigators to a book called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. A collection of Persian poems that have been translated into various languages is not just any book. It's a literary classic that delves into themes of life and death and the impermanence of human existence. The phrase Tamám Shud appears at the very end of the book, serving as a poetic conclusion to the work. Its presence in the man's pocket was not merely a random occurrence. It seemed to be deliberate, and it seemed to be a clue to something that might be linked to this guy's death. So right away, in a twist straight out of a detective novel, in a nearby car found unlocked near the crime scene, a copy of the Rubaiyat is found. It had a series of letters scribbled on its last page, which is believed to be a code or cipher. Despite numerous attempts at the time, the code can't be deciphered. So what do? They go to cryptographers. The letters themselves are arranged in a way that has led many to believe that the cipher, or the code in this case, was professionally done. And we're not talking about a simple substitution cipher that you might find in a children's or kind of a puzzle book. This is something that was able to stump experts and cryptographers for decades. The sequence of letters is so perplexing that it's been analyzed using statistical models, frequency analysis, and machine learning algorithms. And guess what? It remains unciphered to this day. The code consists of a series of letters and numbers that are arranged in distinct lines. Some people speculate that it's actually a one-time pad encryption, which if true, would make it nearly impossible to crack without the corresponding key. Others think it might be mnemonic, basically a set of initials meaning something else, or even part of a complicated math formula. Those one-time pad encryptions, it is a technique that's used with things like, if you're a spy, there's things called like number stations that might transmit data on a radio frequency. You're going to have a pad that has a code to decipher that incoming message. And when you're done with it, it's destroyed. And for the next transmission, you'll need a different, essentially, cipher to crack the next transmission, because it'll be transmitted using a different kind of code. So it's a one-time use only. And if the message had already been transmitted before this guy died, it would be completely useless, say, in that case. So we got all these things lining up. This is definitely no mistake. This guy ends up here. There's a book literally with a code in it that matches a secret piece of paper sewn to this guy's pants. So we got a mystery. There's absolutely no doubt about it at this point. I couldn't imagine what the investigators were thinking. And I could imagine this probably was all consuming for some of them. Even with the autopsy and the information that was gathered, there was no cause of death that was conclusive at the time. So he's just dead. That is all they know. It's the car that was found by the crime scene that contained the book, the Rubaiyat. The owner who remains that car has chosen to remain anonymous to this day. And in police reports, there's a person referred to as Mr. Francis. Now, as you might be wondering, why the anonymity? It's not really known if he was involved, particularly in this case, or his car just happened to merely be at the random location and the book happened to be placed in it. Mr. Francis reported finding the book in the glove compartment of his car, which was parked not far from the Somerton Man. The proximity alone raises eyebrows. Was it a mere coincidence? Or is this a deeper connection between the car and its owner? Could he have been involved in some covert activities linked to the Somerton Man? Or simply a bystander who was unwittingly entangled in one of Australia's biggest mysteries? I will say that if you're some kind of international spy, covert operator type thing, I don't think you're going to put the book in your own car and call police. So upon examination, the book had some peculiar features. The last page contained the series of letters, the code. Now, if you thought the code was the only enigma tied to the copy of the Rubaiyat, there's more. There's a telephone number scribbled on the back cover of the book. And it wasn't just any phone number. It led investigators straight to the doorstep of a woman who lived a mere 5-minute walk from Somerton Beach. Let's pause and let that sink in. 5-minute walk in a case where every lead seemed to evaporate into thin air. Here was a living, breathing person almost at arm's length from the crime scene, like finding a needle in a haystack, only to discover the needle might be tied to an even bigger mystery. So, this enigmatic woman goes by the name of Jo Thompson, and she also uses a pseudonym called Justin. When the investigators showed up at her door, she seemed startled and almost evasive. Her reactions were a mix of surprise, confusion, and some say a hint of recognition. It was as if she knew more than she was willing to share, fueling, again, endless amounts of theories and speculation surrounding this person. So now they have all these kind of interweaved people and stories or timelines, whatever you want to call it, connected to this body. Don't know who it is and don't know how he died. The police did make a public appeal in this case, and they didn't get anywhere on it other than connecting with the anonymous Mr. Francis. The theories definitely ran wild with this case, or still do to this day, and we're going to go over a few of them that kind of tried to explain away why you have a body washed up in a beach, no cause of death, his identity is concealed, he contains a secret message linked to a book in a car nearby that has a cipher to probably an even bigger code. Pretty cool mystery if you ask me. So the first one is that he is a spy. So it's the espionage theory. And being that it is a time where the Cold War is dawning, it's definitely possible. The area is rife with political tensions and covert operations, and Adelaide was home to several military and industrial facilities, and they would have been of interest to foreign powers. The man's lack of identifications, the mysterious circumstances of his death, and the potential possession of obviously a cipher, points to the fact that he might have been a spy. Another theory is that it's an unrequited love, and the man kills himself. The theory gained momentum when Justin was identified as a person of interest in this case. So Thompson living near the beach, and maybe he came to profess his love or caught her cheating or did something, and he decided to end his life. And it's a good theory, but leaves a lot of questions to why would you just have secret code pans? So the one thing with any suicide theories around this guy is that there was no indication about how he could have died. So if it was self-inflicted, he didn't shoot himself in the head. There was no poison containers found at the scene. The toxicology reports are inconclusive. So it's just a real mystery. Another one is the prankster theory. It could again be somehow this guy in a desperate attempt for attention or something weird concocts this bizarre mystery and offs himself. And to be honest, it's not that far out there. I think humans are capable of about just any kind of crazy crap you can think of. So it's definitely possible. One thing I think about is the unidentified owner of the car being involved, not necessarily as a suspect, but maybe there was like a forbidden love. The Rubaiyat is found, right? And in 1940s Australia, being openly gay would not only stigmatize, it's straight up illegal. And it would provide a motive for both men to keep their relationship a secret. Could the car owner either have murdered the Somerton Man, or could this be some kind of issue between two lovers that went wrong and it led to somebody dying? So could be the case. However, there's not really any evidence pointing to that from the police because they're not talking about it from what I can see. People are still trying to solve the code today. Like nobody, it's been years and years and people are still interested, still fascinated with this case and still trying to figure it out. And guess what? We're slowly getting closer. So there's been a lot of modern advances since 1940s, one of them being DNA. So in 2019, the Australian government grants an approval to exhume the body of the Somerton Man in hopes that modern DNA testing can finally reveal its identity. Led by Professor Derek Abbott from the University of Adelaide, the team extracts samples of hair and teeth for analysis. Despite the promise that genetic testing holds, the results were inconclusive. The DNA samples were entered into global databases and would not yield any results, leaving the man's identity still shrouded in mystery. At the time, they decided they would turn to digital forensics and code breaking. So they started using more and more powerful computers now, moving into like the 2019-20 area, and trying to decipher the code on the back of the Rubaiyat. And despite using all these computers and modern techniques, it's still unbroken. Some experts argue that it might be a one-time pad encryption, so it ends up just being a meaningless sequence of letters, possibly, without the other part of the code. Through the use of the computers and stuff, there is pattern recognition that it's not just a random sequence. So it's not just a couple of random letters in the book. Not that it's a physical impossibility of that, but it's highly unlikely. One of the things that's also done is facial reconstruction. They do that also using the isotope analysis from the man's hair, so it shows what he would have looked like based on his genetics. So they're hitting all these dead ends with the DNA sequencing, the cryptographer, up until a couple years ago, and a breakthrough comes through, and one of the rootless hair shafts yields 2 million single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNMPs, which honestly, that doesn't mean a lot to most people, but I can tell you what it does mean. What it does mean is that they have a genetic sequence, which means they can identify this person. So they do. They find that this genetics belong to a man by the name of Charles Webb, right? Mystery going to be solved? I don't think so. So Melbourne-born Webb was an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in 1905. This identification was made possible through the advancements in the genealogy that allowed them to trace back kind of his family roots and trace that to some family photographs and divorce papers, which were discovered, which shed a tiny bit of light, but not a lot in his life. So not everybody was convinced that this was the guy, and there was some dissenters, but for the most part, I think it's been scientifically accepted, like this is the person. And when you put that together with the fact that you have this divorce and the age and the family photos, it all makes sense. The little bit that they do find out about him is that Webb was maybe a man who enjoyed playing some football, and his divorce papers describe his marriage to somebody named Dorothy Robertson and described him as moody and friendless, with indications that he may have attempted suicide. This paints a picture of a guy that maybe isn't doing the best mentally, but it leaves so many questions. And for the most part, like being depressed or being divorced or knowing this guy's name, that's all I know, doesn't explain how he ends up on a beach. There's no cause of death. There is literally a secret note in his pants and a cryptograph, cipher, code, like Da Vinci's Code stuff. It's almost like it makes it worse knowing his name, because it tells you, it seems like it's going to tell you something. It tells you absolutely nothing. That's all you know, is that he was married to somebody like years ago. The guy was alienated from everybody. He's just walking around with like secret codes in his pants. We don't got any answers. And people are still trying to solve this code. And I'd love to know your thoughts on how or what happened to this guy. And if you think he was involved in some kind of like government op or assassinated possibly, that seems to be, from my perspective, the most likely thing. The only like other thing outside of him being an operative is for him to have purposely hid this code in his pants and just happened to be like a civilian who knew how to do all this stuff. It doesn't seem very likely to be back then. That is where the mystery ends. So thanks again for listening, everyone. And if the Ghost of Charles Webb is listening, please give me an email or something and just let us know exactly what the real story is of this.